Hello there, I'm Jimmy Vegas, and this is how to make a first-person shooter in Unity 5. Welcome to episode 19. So last episode, if you remember guys, we started looking at some artificial intelligence, and we had these cubes over here move towards us and look at us as and when we need to. So this episode, I asked if you guys wanted it in C# or JavaScript, and the result was C#. However, if you guys still want it in JavaScript, I will leave a pinned comment in this video with the exact replica of the JavaScript for it. So we're going to do C# in this. So this episode is like a kind of transition phase where we'll start using C#, and we can see that although we've written these scripts in JavaScript, we don't need to rewrite them at all. They are fine as they are. In fact, you could have two different script types on same object. So this floor here, if you want to have a JavaScript and a C# script on there, you could. It's fine. So I'm going to start by bringing in our enemy. So I'm going to click on our assets here, and I'm going to drag and drop this zombie enemy, which you can get if you go over to our website, jvunity.com, head to downloads and assets, and go to the FPS page, episode 19, you can download it there. So currently we have these cubes as enemies. I'm actually going to disable these three now, and we're going to start from absolute scratch so we can get this just right. So the way this AI is going to work is kind of like a combination of what we did last episode, but obviously converted to C#, and with a little bit of a twist on it with some animation. So I'm going to start by importing the enemy into the game. So in the zombie folder, I'm going to bring in this zombie right here. We just need to increase its size because it is just a little bit small. So I'm going to increase it to 100 by 100 by 100. Now it's worth noting this particular model has already been pre-done with animations and textures and everything, so you don't need to worry about them at the moment. So once we have our zombie in, what we need to do is add a new cube to the zombie and then uncouple. So on the zombie, right click, 3D object, cube. Now what this cube is going to be is, how can I put it? It's going to be like a case for our zombie. So I'm just going to drag it out of the zombie for now. And I'm going to decrease the size to 1 by 1 by 1. And then we just need to arrange the size of the cube to roughly match the zombie itself. So we can use the sliders here to increase, decrease. So that looks okay. Let's increase the size just a little more. And let's bring it up. It doesn't matter if you don't have it quite right. It's something that we can change later on. And let's do the Z. Okay, that looks about right. And now I'm going to turn off the mesh renderer. I'm going to right click and rename the cube, and I'm going to call it zombie enemy 01, and then I'm going to drag and drop the zombie model onto the enemy itself. So now the cube is encompassing our actual zombie, and what we'll be able to do now is control that cube and then control the zombie separately. It just gives us a bit more leeway with things. So the zombie itself, if we click on here, you'll see the little arrow next to it. When you click the arrow, you'll see a couple of different things. These are the preset animations already done, and this helps us a lot. If you don't want to use this model, you could perhaps go to the asset store and download your own model of whatever enemy you wanted, whether it was another zombie, whether it was a soldier, whatever. You can do that as long as it's already rigged, it's got the animations and whatnot. So we're going to take the attacking animation, hold control, press D to duplicate, and you'll notice it duplicates it outside of this. That's exactly what we want. And we'll do the same with idle, hold control, press D, and also walking, hold control, press D, and then you can collapse that up. So we now have three separate animations. So let's go to the zombie himself and let's remove the animator component because we don't want that animator. Right click, remove component. We'll be using the animation rather than animator. Using animation kind of gives us a bit more power, how we can use an animation, and a bit more control about when we can use the animation on the enemy itself. So I'm going to go on the zombie enemy cube, which we have, and we're going to apply a little bit of physics. So add component and go to physics and click on rigid body. And the idea of this is it kind of makes everything a bit more sane in the game world. So I'm going to take my first person controller now out of that corridor and bring it into this room here, so as we can play the game and deal with things much quicker rather than have to go through everything at all. So you can see as we stand now, we have the zombie here and he's fallen over. The reason he's fallen over, we have the rigid body. Don't worry about that. So should we play around with the rigid body on our zombie? Let's change collision detection to, let's change it to continuous dynamic. It shouldn't make too much of a difference at this point, but it may be handy later on. Let's also increase the, in fact, we'll leave the drag for now. I was going to increase that, but we'll increase that later on as we've done our script. So now let's get to that script. So in the script folder, right click, create, and go to C# script. You'll notice as we do this C# script, a lot of things are very, very similar to JavaScript itself. So I'm going to call this one zombie follow. So let's open that up in MonoDevelop or Visual Studio, whichever one you have. And I'm not going to go into too much detail about how to use C# script. There are a few little subtle differences, for example, how we define our variables. So you'll notice when you start a C# script, you have a couple more things than you would do with a JavaScript. I'm going to delete everything from this mono behavior line all the way down to the line it's highlighted here. So we don't need any of that at the moment. One thing to make sure with the C# script is that the public class name here, zombie follow, must always match the script name itself. So if you change a script name, make sure you change the public class name as well. So this particular script, we're going to need about 6 or 7 variables. We're going to state our first variable as the player. And we do that by going public game object, and we're going to call it the player. Now you'll notice at this point, the way we've defined it is slightly different than JavaScript, because with JavaScript, you define the name first and then the type. With C#, you define the type first and then the name. Next one is going to be a distance, because we're going to be using array cast. So public float, and let's call it target distance. The next one is going to be our allowed range, so how far the zombie can be away at any given time before it does something. So public float again, and allowed range, I'm going to make it equal to 10 by default. Next, we're going to have the enemy itself. So public game object, and we'll just call it the enemy, semicolon. Next is going to be the enemy speed. So public float enemy speed. I'm not going to define anything as default at the moment because we'll do it in the script itself. Next is going to be an attack trigger. So public int, obviously for integer, attack trigger, semicolon. Next one, we'll have to do the raycast itself. So public raycast hit, and we'll call it just shot. So we have, how many variables is that? 7 variables we have there now. So we're going to be doing this in a void update because we need this to function every single frame. So void update, and obviously this works the same way as a function update in JavaScript. So at this point we want to transform dot look at the player. So the player dot transform. So you'll notice that is, I think it's the exact same in JavaScript. So already you can see the similarities between JavaScript and C#. So next we're going to have a raycast, and this raycast is going to tell us how far. So if physics.raycast, and we've already done a raycast before, so I don't need to explain everything here. Transform.position, comma, and we need to transform direction, so we need to do it forwards. So in brackets it's vector 3 dot forward, close bracket, comma. Now in JavaScript we would normally put the variable which is the raycast hit, which is in this case shot, but with C# we have to put the word out and then our variable, which is shot. So we've done our if statement, so open curly bracket, and now we need to make target distance equal to shot dot distance. So we make that variable equal to whatever we have as the raycast. So then we need another if statement, if, then we need to see if target distance is actually less than the allowed range. Close bracket, open curly bracket, and if it is, let's set our enemy speed. So enemy speed equals, and I'm going to put a very low number here. The reason I'm going to put a low number is because I'm going to play around with the drag a little later on in the tutorial. So I'm going to put, let's put 0.02 and then put an F. So in C#, whenever you put a decimal number, you always have to put an F afterwards to define it as a float. Even though we've already defined it as a float up in the variables, you still have to put that F. Semicolon. So now we need to do yet another if statement, because we need to check if the enemy can attack us or not. So if attack trigger is equal to 0, then do the following. So the idea of what's going to happen here is that we'll have a trigger set up on ourselves around the player to say if the enemy enters this particular trigger, then we're going to attack. If the player isn't in that trigger, then he'll just walk, or we'll check if it's too far away, in which case it will be idle. So to sort this bit out, we need to go the enemy dot get component, open spiky bracket, and we need to put animation, close spiky bracket, open close bracket, dot play, and then open bracket, and then quote. And now at this point we need to define which animation we're going to use. So the attack trigger is 0, which means the enemy is not in the trigger. So we would want it to walk towards us. So we would use the walking animation. So in here, walking, quote, close bracket, and semicolon. So we've set the walking animation here at this point. We now need to set the speed at which the enemy is going to come towards us whilst playing this walking animation. So transform dot position equals vector 3 dot move towards, and then in brackets we need to put transform dot position, comma, and then we need to define the player's position. So we do the player dot transform dot position, and then we need to do the speed, which we've already defined here as 0.02. So we just put enemy speed, and then close bracket, semicolon, and then we can close that attack trigger if statement. So close curly bracket. After that, let me see. So I'm just going to go over this just to make sure we are doing everything right here. So if the target distance is there, then it's going to walk whilst the trigger is 0. So we can close this now, the second if statement here, but we also need to perform an else statement. So for example, if we're out of range, the enemy will stop. So we need to do else, open curly bracket, and then we need to do enemy speed equals 0, so it stops. But we also need to play the idle animation, i.e. the zombie is stood still. So the enemy dot get component, and it's in spiky brackets animation, open close bracket dot play, and then open bracket quote, and the name of the animation we want to play is called idle. So idle quote close bracket semicolon. So now we close that else statement, which brings that to an end. And at this point, we need to close the raycast if statement. So all we've got here now, this basically, all these lines of code basically just say, zombie stood still. If we're within range, it'll start walking towards us, providing that the attack trigger is not equal to 1. So if it is equal to 1, or rather if it's equal to 0, it'll play this, but if it is equal to 1, then we need to play the attacking animation. So if attack trigger is equal to 1, open curly bracket, we need to do the enemy dot get component, and in spiky brackets animation, close spiky brackets, open close bracket dot play, and then in quotes we need to put just attacking. So that's the name of the animation we're using here, attacking, in quotes, close bracket, semicolon, and let's close that if statement, and then let's close our void update. So that's how it should look at this point. And I've noticed here that I've spelled position wrong. That's one great thing about C#. If something doesn't seem right in the script, it will highlight it red. That is one thing I really do like about C#. It highlights it red. I'm not sure whether it does it in Visual Studio, but it definitely does it in MonoDevelop. So I'm going to save that script there. And I'm going to go back to Unity. Okay, so it's saying, it's giving us an error. Let's see. So what doesn't it like about this particular line? Let's see here. What's is this the same line? Yeah, I think it's given us, yeah. So something about this line it doesn't like. Let's double check. What have we done here? So transform dot position. So we'll move towards, oh, of course, here it's a capital T. Sometimes when the autofill happens, it kind of throws everything up in your face. So make sure that's a lowercase t there. Save, and let's head back to Unity. There we go. Error's gone. So we've kind of half written this script now. So let's apply everything to get our zombie working. And what we're going to need to do is on the zombie itself, we're going to need to add component. And let's type in anim, and let's get our animation. Click on it. Now, these 3 animations, we're going to need, let's click on loop time on all of them. And on each one now, we need to set as legacy. Now, the reason we need to set as legacy is because they're going to be kind of like, how can I put it, like a child of this particular animation component. So they need to be set as legacy. To do that, if we go over here to our little drop down menu and click on debug, we can then click on legacy on each of the 3 animations, like so. And let's tick back to normal. Wrap mode, let's set to loop. On idle, let's set to loop. And attacking, once again, loop. There we go. Okay, so on the zombie slow, let's set the first animation, which is going to be idle, because we want idle to be the default animation for the zombie. So let's bring that onto there. Size will change to 1, and element 0 will be idle. So we want 3 animations in total, so let's set the size to 3. Hit enter. It'll duplicate whatever's in element 0, but we can overwrite them with whatever we want. So let's bring walking into element 1 and attacking into element 2. And I'm going to save my project there. So hopefully now we have the script working. The only thing we don't have in this script at the moment is the what have we not got? We've not got the trigger working just yet, but we can work on that as we get the process in. So let's take our script and let's drag and drop it onto the zombie enemy cube. You'll see here we only have to place 2 variables. So the player is the first variable, and the enemy is the zombie itself, the zombie model. Now, hopefully at this point, what's going to happen is we'll start the game and the zombie will turn to look at us and follow us, come towards us. So I'm going to move the player away from the enemy just so we can get a sense of the enemy coming towards us. So I'm going to rotate him on 180 so we're looking at the zombie, and let's press play. So there we go. The zombie's now coming towards us because we're within its range. So if we go over this way, let's run. Hopefully we're at the zombie range, and you can see, because we're at the zombie range, he's now stood still. He's in his idle position, constantly repeating itself. So as we get closer, you can see we're then within his range, so the zombie is coming towards us. Just glitch a little bit, but we're going to solve that in just a second, because at this point we'd want the zombie to attack us. Now, I don't know whether you noticed at this point, but the zombie looks like his feet do slip on the floor a little bit, as though he's walking a bit too fast. So we can counter that by going to the zombie enemy cube, and let's increase the drag to, let's say, 3. In fact, no, we'll do it a little bit higher. Let's do 6, and let's see how that looks on our zombie now. Okay, so let's then change our enemy speed to 0.01, save, and now let's have a look. See if that makes a difference to our enemy walking. Okay, so he's walking a little bit better. It's just a case of messing around with the values of everything. So let's, for example, let's put the mass as 4. And let's see. Okay, so we're looking a bit better now. We're looking a bit better. Let's put our drag to, let's put it to 3. And let's see what we have now. Okay, so you can see we're getting somewhere. It's just a case of working out your numbers on your own and getting everything working just right. Obviously, each model will be different because not everything has the exact same animation. So now let's work on our trigger. The idea of what trigger is going to be kind of like a cube or anything around our player within a certain radius. So if a zombie enemy enters that trigger, then obviously it would attack. So let's start by setting this area where we want it to attack. So on first person controller, right click, 3D object, and let's go to cylinder. I'm going to expand the cylinder to the size I would want the zombie to start attacking. So let's do 3 by 3. And I'm going to decrease the scale to 0.1. And I'm also going to remove the capsule collider, because you'll notice that the collider itself kind of goes in a circle, or a sphere I should say, because we don't want that to happen. We want the collider to be exactly around our cylinder. So right click, remove component, then go on add component, go to physics, and then go to mesh collider, and then tick convex, and then is trigger. So the idea of what we've done here is we put a collider exactly to the shape of our cylinder, and we've made it a trigger area. So if the zombie walks into it, it would theoretically set the attack trigger as 1 when we do it in the script. So to do that, on the script itself, make sure you go to the right section. So make sure this one here closes the void update. And underneath, let's do void on trigger enter, open close bracket, open curly bracket. And in here, we want to set the attack trigger to 1. So attack trigger equals 1. And then close. So obviously, once we enter it, we want it to attack. However, when the zombie leaves this trigger area, we need it to stop attacking and carry on walking towards us. So we need to do void on trigger exit. Open close bracket, open curly bracket. And you've probably guessed it now. Attack trigger equals 0. Semicolon. And then close curly bracket and resave that script. So hopefully everything should work as intended now. So let's go to Unity. Let's turn off the mesh renderer for the trigger. And I'm going to right click, rename, and let's have it as enemy trigger. And let's press play. So let's walk towards our enemy. Let's let him come closer. And there we go. We can see that the enemy is now trying to attack us. So one thing we have noticed at this point, the zombie is still moving towards us. So we need to do a little extra in our script. So when it's attacking, we need to set the enemy speed as 0. So down here in if attack trigger equals 1, let's put the first line of this if statement to be enemy speed equals 0, semicolon, and save. And let's press play again. Let's head to our enemy. So he's still walking towards us, or rather sliding towards us. So let's check what we can do at this point. So the zombie enemy itself, or the zombie enemy cube, oh, there we go. So that's fine. It's just the way the animation is working. So it kind of still walks as it's attacking. Okay, so yeah, that's nothing to worry about now. It's just the way this model works. So obviously if you're using a different model, you would just need to put the enemy speed as 0 anyway. So, as you can see, folks, we're getting somewhere now with our enemies. So for now, if you wanted, you could theoretically duplicate that enemy. And if you remember the script we used on here, where was it? It was the enemy script here. If we were to put that script on the zombie, let's see what effects that has. So drag and drop that enemy script onto enemy 01. So we've got a C# script and a JavaScript. So I'm going to take our player and put them back to where they should be, which was in this hallway. So let's bring them here. Press play, and let's have a go at this now. So let's take our gun, open the door, and now let's see what happens. So yeah, our enemy has died. It's disappeared. So next episode, we're going to look at working on some damage for enemies. We'll see what we can do with a death animation. And I think it'll be time to start looking at level design, because to be fair, although we have this here, we have little things here and there to play around with. There are different things that we can do in a level design. So guys, until next episode, what I would recommend is you play around and try and fine tune your script. And if you've got any ideas or comments or additions that you think would be good for the script, let me know in the comments below and we'll see what we can do. So guys, until next episode, thanks for watching.